Hi, welcome to the Synapse podcast. I'm Lauren Prager, and it is my pleasure to come to you live with a friend coming to us from the Space Coast on the East Coast of Florida. Welcome, Jarin Eisenberg from Groundswell Startups to the Synapse podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
It's wonderful to have you, and I love that we can do these conversations virtually. So we really are able to bring everybody together no matter where you're located. So I always like to start out by inviting our guests to introduce yourself and share what you're working on and introduce Groundswell Startups.
Perfect. So I'm Jarin Eisenberg. I am the CEO of Groundswell Startups. We are a nonprofit high-tech incubator and co-working space located here on the Space Coast. We are actually the largest privately funded incubator in the Southeast. And what we do here and do really well is bring really great resources, mentorships, and access to capital to founders here in our community. We've recently just opened a state-of-the-art prototyping lab to respond to the growing needs of our hardware companies. So we really pride ourselves on building that holistic ecosystem that can really wrap their arms around founders to help them take those steps forward.
You all do so much, and it's really a layered approach to the way that you engage. And knowing that you're the largest tech incubator in the Southeast was really surprising to me, even in just kind of preparing for this conversation. So tell a little bit about kind of the origin stories of Groundswell. How did this come to be, and how you're serving a growing and really changing community?
Yeah, so Groundswell started in the most grassroots, authentic way. It was really led by one of our co-founders, Jenna Reed, who for a year and a half was meeting up with tech founders in bars and coffee shops, helping with performas and pitch decks. And she really came together with 3 Space Coast natives who are been there, done that, startup founders who really came together and saw a need for this type of community. Brevard is heavily dominated by aerospace and government defense companies. That's great, but it can lead to kind of a closed off culture. And we really wanted to be the opposite of that. So what started as an old skate park that we turned into an incubator. I'm in an 11,000 square foot building with 16 offices, a large co-working space, graffiti everywhere. We kept as much of the original art as possible, has now expanded into 5 buildings, which is super unique. So as companies raise capital, they can hire people, they outgrow their small offices, they can move into larger adjacent buildings. And that is really kind of one of the secret sauces of Groundswell, and that you have founders that have just navigated a often complex funding process, many of which are hardware companies that have greater barriers to that. And then you're keeping them in the ecosystem, running into and sharing knowledge with founders that are trying to go through that process. So lots of different industries, lots of different technologies, and that really helps build this really robust network that we can tap into based on what our companies need.
So because you have hardware and software, which is really unusual, I think a lot of times tech incubators are really focused on kind of the software build. So can you share more about how you identify the companies, help them build their foundation, provide resources to them? Because it's obviously a very different capital outlay, and with a real focus right now, at least in our society, on manufacturing, especially domestic manufacturing. You really positioned Groundswell to be a really valuable and maybe even unusual resource in the community that folks can take advantage of.
Yeah, so we always kind of start with the conversation. We have what we call like a structured but unstructured approach. So we have proven strategies for how to help companies get ready for funding, access capital, and then scale. But it always just starts with us meeting them. Who are you? What is your technology? What is your industry? And we have a lot of hardware companies. It really kind of kicked off with Tomahawk Robotics and the incredible success that they've had. But really the catalyst for this was we had a company, SwiftPaws, who's no stranger to your organization, who had a part come in and that part was wrong. And my board, being who they are, they're like, no, we're going to solve this problem. So they bought us a bunch of 3D printers. They were the cheapest we could find at the time. And we got to work and we produced 826 parts for SwiftPaws. We assembled those products here at Groundswell, and it just opened this whole other opportunity of like, what else could we do? And so we were able, thanks to a one-time grant from a county commissioner, get state-of-the-art additive manufacturing equipment. We moved the lab into its own building. We bought all sorts of scopes and power banks and laser cutters so that startups have unprecedented access to getting something designed, getting it in their hand. I've been doing a ton of small batch manufacturing lately. So runs of 70, 100, 300 to bridge that gap between I have a prototype to I need to go get 5,000 of something. That gap is so important to fill because it allows for market validation. It allows them to find their product market fit, to really know what they need before they go make that bigger spend. And no one was really kind of addressing that need for startups in our area. And so we thought, let us try to do it.
I love that. And I want to take a moment and maybe you can share a little bit more about what SwiftPaws does, because when people hear Space Coast, they obviously think about our nation's heritage with space exploration, obviously NASA's presence. And as you mentioned, aerospace is really the leading industry in that area. But SwiftPaws is really a unique organization. It's a unique company serving a very different model. And I think when we think about tech hubs and manufacturing, we want to really expand our mind about what that represents. So just as an example of the types of innovation that you're seeing really right there in your own community and that we're fostering across Florida, share a little bit about what they do. And yes, they were finalists in the Synapse Innovation Awards and the Synapse Pitch Competition at this year's Synapse Summit 2023, which was awesome to get a chance to pass the mic to Megan twice to share her story. And they've really had a lot of successes. So why don't you just share a little bit about what they do for the community?
Yeah, Megan is an incredible founder. She makes a lure chasing toy for dogs. So it's a system of pulleys that you set up to bring the best game of chase ever to your backyard. It goes up to 36 miles per hour, it's 750 feet. She's really established herself as that premium brand for lure chasing. She was just at ESPN running the fastest dogs competition on her pro grade equipment. So Megan, female founder, hardware company. I mean, barriers to access to capital all around her. And what Groundswell has been really able to do, and I really attribute this a lot to Megan and my fantastic board, is use every kind of resource in their network to get funding for Megan to allow her to launch these new products and scale. So over the past few weeks, Megan has been leading up to the launch of her brand new product, which is Chase. So if you saw her on Shark Tank last April, she promised to make a more accessible, affordable version of her lure chasing equipment. And what we've been able to do at the lab is pretty incredible. So Chase has been fully developed in our prototyping lab by Catania Product Development. So what's really unique here is that Megan's office and Catania's office are right next door to each other. Catania is in that prototyping lab with us. So what normally would have taken maybe 18 plus weeks to get a good prototype in hand, we've been able to do in 6, because we're able to rapidly reiterate on that product, print it, put it in Megan's hand, test it outside. And that's truly going to allow them to scale while also bringing down cost on that development of the product. So Chase is going to ship this December. That's their big holiday season. And just to watch Megan consistently, take down those barriers in front of her and push forward to bring this brand to life has been really exciting.
I love that. And it's fun to see how that proximity makes such an impact, how companies are working together. Those of you who have been a part of the Synapse community know Catania. They actually won an exhibitor award at Synapse Orlando 2022 because they really are creators. They're more than prototypers. They're builders and focusing on working really closely with the innovators, just like they're doing with Megan. And so we were so thrilled to have Stephanie and her crew with us at Synapse Orlando and Synapse Summit. So again, pulling in creators, manufacturers in proximity really does make a difference. And that's a big component, I know, of what you and I believe in, that you need to be connected. We need to be able to catalyze innovation and help people to create. And when we bring those resources together, especially like you're doing with offices next to each other, facilities right in the same building, you can really accelerate growth in incredible ways and keep it here in our community and help build more jobs, more companies, and really build our economic development in our own local ecosystems. So kudos to you for creating the space and repurposing a space to allow this type of a growth. I think that's really remarkable. I want to share a little bit more about this prototype lab. You mentioned this, and it's relatively new. So, I want to take a moment and share more about what the capabilities are, what the vision is for this. And, as people in our markets are thinking about where to move their businesses, how to grow their companies, how they can take advantage of the resources that you and your team and your board have made available.
Yeah. So, I see so many founders come in who have spent so much money trying to get a prototype or a design done, and they don't have anything to show for it. And that hurts to see. So it was really like an extension of getting people connected to vetted resources and leaning heavily into additive manufacturing. We know that hardware companies have a harder time getting funded because they're capital intensive. So what if I can break down those barriers for companies? What if I can accelerate their timelines? What if I can show investors that, hey, these are companies you want to look at? So the Additive Manufacturing Lab has a nylon printer, large resin printers, all different types of FDM printers and scopes. We have 2 Florida Tech engineering interns that help us run that lab, design products for companies. We have the guidance of Catania in that lab to help us. So it is very new. It's been open about 2 months now officially. And we really are not only serving Space Coast founders in that lab, we are really serving statewide. I mailed parts to Alabama last week. I mailed parts to California last week. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we are fast. So we operate with a sense of urgency. Somebody sends us our part and I'm like, it has to be done yesterday. So we're doing 24-hour turnaround times. And then when you have those companies with those products and then you can connect them to all the other business resources that they need, you're giving them a really good chance to be successful.
It's really powerful and really, I think, makes a huge difference and is accelerating growth within the Space Coast community. I want to also give you a chance to kind of share some of the resources that are part of the Space Coast community. There are incredible high-tech universities located there, Florida Tech, Embry-Riddle. And I think it's important for people to understand when we talk about talent, there's a lot of layers of talent that exist there that are all part of what's been bubbling up and really expanding there in the Space Coast. Can you share a little bit more about how you're seeing the talent develop and those resources that exist in that marketplace?
Yeah, so this area has just grown so much, especially in the past 5 years. So we love tapping into the talent at Florida Tech. They create astronauts. Those students are brilliant. Their passion for aerospace and 3D printing. My interns ask me often if they can live in the lab. And I'm like, you can't, it's not your home. But it just shows like they have a true passion for these things. And that's really exciting. So we're always tapping into Carol Ann from UCF will come up to meet with my companies. I'm doing a collaborative letter right now with Stephanie from Embry-Riddle. So we really believe that founders should go wherever they can get the best resources for their product, right? And so that means collaborating. It means I have to know what resources are out there. Florida Tech just got a metal printer. That's great for our region. It's something that I can't afford, but I can refer companies to them. And then we have some incredible area manufacturers. So once they get out of this prototyping phase, we have companies like Jacon Systems and Anderson Connectivity that are true manufacturers that can help these businesses scale. And the best part about it is that they feel a sense of responsibility and ownership to the community as a whole. So companies get taken care of really well. And that's always my number one priority.
So being a part of a community is more than just your work. And one of the things I think is really special about the way that you approach community building and business impact is that you understand that what we do in your day to day is important, but creating an environment where it's fun to work, it's great to live, there's lots of growth and opportunities is really also part of the way you're thinking of developing and impacting the changes within the Space Coast. So what is life like, out on the Space Coast, and what are some of the changes, especially as things are exploding in the last 5 years, just growth, more people moving there, more companies starting there? What's life like for those of us living and working around in the Space Coast, and what do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, so this is a great community, especially if you're a young professional. It's still a place that you can have a hand in shaping its culture. It's still trying to figuring out what that is. We're transitioning from being like kind of a snowbird beach town to like this high tech private space kind of community. And so, when I was my previous position, I was the executive director in downtown. I was part of our first mixed use residential housing, our boutique hotel. Those are things that you see all the time in bigger cities, but we're big monumental projects for this community. So I think what you're really seeing is quality of life changes, people wanting different things. And the startup community is such a great part of that because you're giving people more options. They're not moving here with just one big company in town, right? There are all these great options. And at Groundswell, we've been able to get 40 companies funded, over $150 million in outside capital raised. We don't take any equity in that. But what you're doing is creating lots of places for people to work, to really dive into their interests, to connect with their community. And that helps them stay. That helps people retain that talent. And that's critical for this area to grow.
I really appreciate how you're thinking about the experience of working and living in the community so holistically. Arts and community is a really key component to inspiring innovation. And you and I share a kind of a common language in talking about breaking down silos to really build a strong community, and kind of your philosophy on that, I think, is important to share, because when you're really a community builder in the role that you are, it's really just more than running Groundswell. It's building community. You really have to have a certain approach, a certain philosophy. So, you had shared a little bit about kind of a collective impact model and the idea of being weavers in our community. So I'd love for you to share more about your philosophy, because, as a leader, you shape how a lot of these initiatives unfold and the bigger picture for the region.
Yeah. So collective impact and what it means to be a weaver out of the Absent Institute are like fundamental theories that have informed how I do everything. And really what that says is I want to focus on the interest at hand. And to really be able to solve complex problems, we have to bring people to the table that often have competing interests, that often don't want to be at the table together, to build some kind of commonality between them. And I'm a grassroots person. I believe that we can kind of accomplish almost anything with really small conversations that break down distrust and then bringing people together. And so that often means putting egos aside, right? Not having ownership of something, but really being able to move that ahead. I really focus on how can we create like systematic lasting change for our community. And so do that, it can't be one-offs, right? It has to be really strong partnerships that are built on trust. We're not always asking for something in return, that you just do it because it's good for the picture as a whole. So one of the reasons we don't take equity at Groundswell is because we believe in give first. If we're good to companies and we help them build, they're going to give back to the ecosystem in some way. That is the foundation of everything that we do here. Culture is incredibly important to us. So it's oftentimes, taking a step back, having a true outsider's perspective, and then figuring out, how do I weave my way through people and organizations to kind of get what needs to be done that's in the best interest of the community as a whole.
That's a really, really mission critical philosophy, and one that I know we share in common. Also, as a nonprofit, community first is our number one core value. So, when you can kind of, like you said, take ego out of it, really think about the broader goals of the community, helping that rising tide to lift all ships, then you are able to move past those specific barriers and those silos and work together towards a common goal. So, the accomplishments that you've created through your leadership at Groundswell, and just the energy that you bring, I think speaks for itself and is worth knowing. This is really, I think, those of us who work in this world embrace that philosophy, and it's what makes great partnerships, and it's what makes this fun and, most importantly, impactful. So I love that you bring that to the community and you model that not just through your words but through your actions. So thank you for being that kind of a partner.
Yeah.
I really want to take a moment also for you to share your story, how you got into this work, community building, and then specifically into working with Groundswell.
Yeah, so most of my career has been in downtown revitalization efforts and economic development, which I kind of fell into. I had a friend that was moving and she said, "Want to come be the executive director of downtown Melbourne?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is, but that sounds cool." So I went and I did that, and I had a really, unique opportunity to shape downtown, which, when we talk about talent and retention, I mean, downtowns are the centerpieces of our community. So I had an opportunity to really do some things, to do murals and development and create a food and wine festival. And the property owner of Groundswell was a property owner downtown. So he kind of saw my work. And he said, "Hey, do you want to come run Groundswell? We're looking for a director." And I was like, "I don't know about that. I don't know about tech." He asked me what my favorite startup was. I said, like, a new shampoo company that I was interested in. But, he really saw something that I did not see in myself at that time. So I kind of stepped into this position really as a true outsider. I've been lucky that my board has kind of spent a lot of time and development with me to learning the things that I need to know. But I quickly realized that all the same strategies applied, right? I can learn cap tables, I can learn capital investment, I can do all that. But really what it takes to build an ecosystem is really a lot of the strategies that I use to build downtown Melbourne. So it's 4 years later, and I have taken a super deep dive into tech. I was post-processing parts in the lab last night, right? Because we had parts finished and somebody had to do them. So I've really had a unique opportunity to just really grow in this position and work with investors and help companies raise rounds. And it's just been, every day is new and different. And I've really enjoyed it.
That's wonderful to hear. And I think oftentimes when those of us who don't have a background are kind of given opportunities in these positions, you have one of two choices. Either you can say, "Nope, I don't know anything about this and I'm not going to engage and I'm just going to wait and learn and then figure it out." Or you can just deep dive in and let that curiosity mindset drive you to seeing gaps or opportunities and asking a lot of questions, because that's truly the best way of finding those meaningful connections that sometimes are missed when you're so heads down into an industry or an initiative that you feel already so familiar with. Being a bit of an outsider sometimes can be actually really helpful. So again, I think that's a valuable career insight. And also saying yes to opportunities when you have them. You just never know where the road will lead you. So great that you had a mentor who was, saw something that maybe you hadn't yet seen in yourself and you rose to the occasion. So we're all, a stronger community because you've taken this leadership role. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the questions I always love to ask is about innovation. So you mentioned that you referenced a shampoo company as, your inspiration for a startup. But, while we may not think of innovation in terms of health and beauty, we should. And innovation comes in lots of different forms. So I always like to know, how do you define innovation?
Yeah, I think it comes back to, like, what problem are you solving and what's unique and disruptive about what you're doing, right? And innovation can come in many forms. I see kind of social innovation when people are doing super cool and unique things in their community with affordable housing or workforce development. And then there's innovation that happens here with building new technologies, using AI and machine learning and new ways to bring new capabilities to different industries. I see launches almost every day now here on the Space Coast. I'm kind of like
Amazing.
surrounded by innovation. So I think it does come back to like the root of what problem are you solving and how are you doing it uniquely?
And I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, we talk about innovation not just in terms of hard tech, but it can be in lots of different industries, in the arts, in beauty, in the culinary arts. So yes, you do need to focus on your problem, but to think really broadly about what innovation is allows us to glean inspiration from areas that may not really directly intersect with our world. So keeping that broad mindset makes a huge difference. What is one innovator, who is one innovator, dead or alive, that you go back to always as a source of inspiration, and why?
Yeah, so I am pretty obsessed with Rent the Runway and everything that they have built there. When you read Rent the Runway's story and how like at one point she only has $75,000 to spend on inventory when like inventory is their whole business.
Yes.
I've been an early customer, so I've seen the app evolve. I've seen their offerings evolve. And for me, as like a female professional that's really busy and doesn't have a lot of time, like she's solving a core problem that I have. And so I love Rent the Runway. I love following their journey and seeing how they are involved. I'm like obsessed with the logistics that must go on behind that. I'm also like a huge Peloton fan. And as someone who's seen that company involved and how they've transitioned from the early days to now, what both of those companies have done is made community kind of the backbone of their product. Like Rent the Runway, when you go on that app and I'm able to see how other women of my height and body size wear that dress, like community at its finest, right? Like I have what I call my digital friends on Peloton. Like I've never met these people, but we are in sync on these rides and planning rides together. And so they've made community the backbone of their product, even though they're heavy tech software products. And I kind of love that. I'm kind of driven to that.
I completely understand. Those are two services I also use and value for the same reasons. It's really helpful, but a great also example of innovation that goes beyond some of the hard tech that we sometimes think about, but really does solve a problem that some people have or a need that they have, and creates connection and community in ways that are really valuable. So to think big about innovation and where we get our sources of inspiration from makes a difference. So lastly, I always like to focus on the kind of Synapse mantra: find what you need and share what you have. And we talked a lot about that, but I want to kind of put a fine point on it as our close. So when we talk about that, we operate in Florida. It's a huge state, lots of unique and communities that are super far apart, but the digital world allows us to more easily find what we need and share what we have. And then that spirit of giving and supporting each other, I think that's an important and valuable place to end our conversation on. So when you think about what you need at Groundswell and what your companies need, how can the community help them or help you at Groundswell to find what they need or share what they have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always love having conversations with people. Please reach out to me if there's something that we could do for you. But for me, it's all about access to capital, right? My companies can have the best ideas in the world, but if they don't have the capital to access it, then they can't bring it to life. So I'm always on a mission to meet investors, early stage investors, angel investors. And I've been really fortunate that other incubators and people in the community will introduce me to people that might have an interest in learning more about our companies. And then again, if anybody needs any resources when it comes to prototyping or small batch manufacturing, our lab is open. It's open to you, and we'd love to help you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, for being a part of the Synapse community. We absolutely love getting to work together and amplify the work that you're doing at Groundswell, and to celebrate the accomplishments of the entrepreneurs and innovators that you are supporting in the community. So make sure you connect with Jarin, check out Groundswell. If you have an opportunity to visit the Space Coast, be sure to check out and visit Groundswell. It's really an incredible facility. And we're so proud to have you as part of the movement. And thank you for being part of the reason that innovation lives here.
Thank you so much.